I didn't mean for it to go this far. That's the part that still gets me, how something that started as a petty, stupid idea turned into the one thing I can't walk away from. It started with Alexander. Or more specifically, with what he did. A month ago, I walked into a bar I didn't even like, just because my friends dragged me there after work. Loud music, overpriced drinks, the usual. I wasn't even planning to stay long. But then I saw him, leaning against the counter like he owned the place, laughing at something someone said. Alexander. Confident. Effortless. The kind of guy who didn't try, but still pulled everyone's attention anyway. And next to him? My ex. Yeah. That part. I didn't know they even knew each other. But there they were, standing way too close, laughing like they'd been doing it for years. And the worst part wasn't even that my ex moved on. It was how easy it looked. Like I had never even mattered. I should have left. Any normal person would have. Instead, I stayed. I don't even remember deciding to walk over. One second I was at the edge of the room, the next I was standing right in front of them. My ex noticed me first, his smile faltered, just for a second. Alexander didn't. He just looked at me, calm, curious. Like I was something new he hadn't figured out yet. Pierce, my ex said, awkward. Didn't expect to see you here. Yeah, I replied, keeping my voice steady. Clearly. There was a pause. The kind that stretches just a little too long. Then Alexander stepped in, like he belonged there. Alexander, he said, holding out his hand. Like we were meeting under normal circumstances. I almost didn't shake it. But I did. And the moment I did, something about his grip, firm, deliberate, made it feel like he already had the upper hand. I know who you are, I said. He smirked slightly. I figured. That should have been it. That should have been where I walked away and saved myself a lot of trouble. But then my ex said something, some casual, throwaway comment about how they'd been seeing each other. And something in me snapped. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just quiet and sharp. So I smiled. Not because I felt like it. But because I suddenly had an idea. Good, I said. Then you won't mind if I steal him for a minute? Both of them looked at me. My ex confused. Alexander interested. That was the moment it started. Because he didn't say no. Outside, the air was cooler, quieter. The noise from the bar dulled behind us as the door shut. Alexander leaned against the wall, watching me like he was waiting for a show. Well, he said. You pulled me out here. What's the plan? I should have been honest. Should have told him exactly what this was. But instead I stepped closer. Close enough to make it obvious. You always go after your boyfriend's ex? I asked. He tilted his head slightly. Didn't realize there were rules. There are, I said. You just broke them. For a second, either of us moved. The tension wasn't subtle. It sat right there between us, heavy and undeniable. And then he smiled. Not apologetic. Not even defensive. Just amused. Or, he said, voice lower now, maybe you're not as over him as you think. That hit harder than it should have. So I did the one thing that made sense in that moment. Something impulsive. Stupid. Calculated. I stepped even closer, until there was barely any space left between us. You're right, I said quietly. I'm not. His eyes flickered, just slightly. Got you. But I could be, I added. That's when he really looked at me. Not casually. Not like before. This time, there was something sharper behind it. Something that felt like interest, mixed with challenge. And how exactly does that work? He asked. I shrugged, like it was nothing. Help me get over him. A pause. Then a small laugh. You're asking me to be your rebound? Not asking, I said. Offering. He studied me for a long second. Like he was trying to figure out if this was a joke, or if I was serious. I held his gaze. Didn't back down. Finally, he pushed himself off the wall, stepping closer until we were almost chest to chest. "You don't even know me," he said. "I know enough." "And what's that?" "That you're exactly the kind of mistake I need right now." Another pause. This one heavier. And then, "Yeah," he said quietly. "That sounds like a bad idea." I nodded. "It is." Neither of us moved. But something had already shifted. Because the next thing he said? "All right, Pierce." And the way he said my name, like he was testing it, like he already liked how it sounded, sent something unexpected through me. "I'm in." Looking back, that should have been my warning. Because nothing about the way he said it felt casual. It felt like the beginning of something. And I was too focused on getting revenge to realize I wasn't the only one playing that game. I thought it would feel like winning. That was the whole point, right? Every time I looked at Alexander after that night, I told myself the same thing. This was temporary, controlled, intentional. I wasn't catching feelings, I wasn't getting attached. I was just evening the score. Except it didn't feel like that. Not even a little. It started small. A text the next morning. "Alexander, you always this bold with strangers, or was I special?" I stared at it longer than I should have. Then typed back. "Pierce, don't flatter yourself." He replied almost instantly. "Alexander, too late." I rolled my eyes, but I was smiling. Which already felt like a problem. We didn't define anything. No labels. No expectations. Just started seeing each other. At first, it was exactly what I said it would be. Casual. Detached. Late night meetups, drinks that turned into something else, conversations that didn't go too deep. But Alexander wasn't shallow. That was the first crack in my plan. He paid attention. Not in an obvious way, but in the way he'd remember small things I mentioned without thinking. Like how I hated overly sweet coffee. Or the fact that I always checked exits in crowded places without realizing it. Or how I got quiet when something was actually bothering me. It threw me off. Because this wasn't supposed to matter. He wasn't supposed to matter. A week in, we were back at his place. Nothing fancy. Clean, modern, a little too put together, like him. I was sitting on his couch, flipping through something on my phone while he moved around the kitchen. "You're staying over?" he asked casually. I glanced up. Wasn't planning on it. That was it. No pressure. No follow-up. But something about the way he said it, like he didn't care either way, made me hesitate. "Why?" I asked. He leaned against the counter, watching me. "Just asking. Sounds like you want me to. Sounds like you want me to want you to." I scoffed. "You're annoying. And yet you're still here." "Fair." I locked my phone and tossed it onto the table. "Fine," I said. "I'll stay." He didn't smile. But I caught it in his eyes. That night was the first time things felt different. Not because of anything physical. Because after either of us moved right away. Usually, that's the moment where things shift back, where it becomes casual again, where you create space, reset the distance. But we didn't. I was lying there, staring at the ceiling, when he said quietly, "You're not over him." Straight to it. I exhaled slowly. "That's kind of the whole point of this, remember?" "Yeah," he said. "I remember." Silence stretched between us. "But that's not the only reason." I turned my head to look at him. "What's that supposed to mean?" He was already looking at me. Too directly. "It means," he said, "you didn't have to pick me." My chest tightened, just slightly. "You were convenient," I replied. It came out sharper than I intended. But he didn't react. "If you say so." That should have annoyed me. Instead, it unsettled me. Because it felt like he saw through it. Through me. And I didn't like that. The next time I saw my ex, everything got worse. It was accidental. I was grabbing coffee before work, half asleep, not paying attention, and then I heard his voice behind me. Pierce. I froze. Of course. I turned slowly, already bracing myself. But what I wasn't expecting was the way he looked at me. Not smug. Not indifferent. Just off. I heard you've been hanging out with Alexander, he said. There it was. I shrugged, keeping it casual. So? He hesitated. Which was new. That's fast. I almost laughed. You moved on while we were still together, I said. Don't start pretending you care about timing now. That's not what I. Then what is it? He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. It's just, he's not. Not what? I cut in. He stopped. And for a second, I saw something real there. Something I hadn't seen in a while. He's not the kind of guy you think he is. I felt my jaw tighten. And what kind of guy is that? My ex looked at me, like he was debating whether to say it. The kind that sticks around. That caught me off guard. Because that wasn't what I expected him to say. Not a warning about Alexander being a player. Not some jealous jab. The opposite. He doesn't do casual, Pierce, he added. Not really. I forced a laugh, even though something in my chest had shifted. Good thing that's all this is. My ex didn't look convinced. Is it? I didn't answer. Because for the first time since this started, I wasn't completely sure anymore. That night, when Alexander texted me, "Come over." No emojis. No extra words. Just that. I stared at it longer than I should have. Then grabbed my keys anyway. Because whatever this was turning into, I was already too deep to pretend it was just revenge anymore. By the time I got to Alexander's place, I already knew something was off. Not with him. With me. Because I didn't hesitate this time. Didn't overthink it. Didn't question why I was going over there again, why I kept choosing him without even trying to pretend it was part of some plan. I just went. Like it was normal. Like it meant something. He opened the door before I even knocked. Like he'd been expecting me. Of course he had. You're late, he said, stepping aside to let me in. I wasn't aware there was a schedule. There isn't, he replied. You just don't usually take this long. That made me pause. Because he was right. And the fact that he noticed? Didn't help. I brushed past him anyway, tossing my keys onto the counter like I owned the place. Miss me? He closed the door behind me. Not even a little. I smirked. Liar. Maybe. There was something quieter about him tonight. Less teasing. Less easy. And I couldn't tell if it was just me noticing more, or if something had actually shifted. We ended up on the couch again. Same spot as last time. But it didn't feel the same. There was this tension. Not the usual kind. Not the kind that leads somewhere predictable. Something heavier. So, he said after a minute. You saw him. I glanced at him. You stalking me now? He texted me. Of course he did. I let out a short laugh. What, warning you about me? Something like that. I leaned back against the couch, crossing my arms. And? You scared? Alexander turned his head slightly, looking at me, not amused, not challenged. Just steady? No. That should have been the end of it. But then he added, should I be? And something about the way he said it, like he actually wanted an honest answer, threw me off. I looked away first. No, I said. Unless you're planning on falling in love with me. There it was. The line. The one that was supposed to keep things where they belong. Simple. Detached. Safe. But instead of brushing it off, Alexander went quiet. Not awkward quiet. Intentional quiet. And when I looked back at him, his expression had changed. Softer. But also more serious than I'd ever seen it. That's supposed to be a joke? He asked. I forced a shrug. Depends how you take it. He didn't smile. Didn't look away. Because I don't think you'd like that outcome. My chest tightened again. Annoyingly. Relax, I said, lighter this time. That's not what this is. I know what you said this was. There was something sharp under his voice now. Not angry, just real. But that's not what it feels like. That hit harder than anything else he'd said so far. Because I didn't have a quick response ready. Didn't have something sarcastic or dismissive to throw back at him. So instead I deflected. You're overthinking it. Am I? Yes. Another pause. Then he leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees, still watching me. Then say it. I frowned. Say what? That this is nothing. Easy. It should have been easy. I opened my mouth. And nothing came out. Because suddenly it didn't feel true. And he saw that. Of course he did. He exhaled quietly, leaning back again. That's what I thought. Something defensive flared up in my chest. Don't do that, I snapped. Do what? Act like you figured me out. I haven't, he said calmly. I'm trying to. That wasn't what I expected. And it threw me off more than anything else. Why? I asked before I could stop myself. He didn't answer right away. Just looked at me like he was deciding how honest to be. Because I don't think this is a game for you anymore. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Because he was right. And I hated that he was right. I started this for a reason, I said, quieter now. I know. It wasn't about you. I know that too. Then don't act like it suddenly is. He held my gaze. What if it is for me? That landed differently. I felt it. Didn't want to, but I did. You barely know me, I said. I know enough. I let out a short, humorless laugh. That's what I said to you. Yeah, he replied. And I think you meant it less than I do. That stung. Because there was truth in it. Too much truth. For a second, either of us moved. Then I stood up, needing space. Needing distance. This is exactly why this was a bad idea. I muttered. Yeah, he said behind me. It was. I turned back toward him. Then why didn't you say no? He didn't hesitate. Because I wanted you anyway. And just like that, everything got more complicated. I should have walked out. That would have been the smart thing. The safe thing. Instead, I stayed. And that was the moment I realized. This wasn't revenge anymore. Not even close. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I was still in his bed, staring at the ceiling while Alexander slept beside me like everything was normal. Like he hadn't just said something that rewired the entire situation. Because I wanted you anyway. Who says that? And worse, why did it stick with me like that? I shifted slightly, careful not to wake him, but it didn't matter. Stop thinking so loud. His voice was rough with sleep, barely above a murmur. I exhaled. I'm not. Yeah, he said, eyes still closed. You are. I glanced at him. You always this observant? He cracked one eye open, just enough to look at me. Only when it matters. That word again. Matters. I looked away first. The next morning felt off. Not awkward. Not distant. Just different. Like we'd crossed some invisible line and neither of us knew how to step back over it. Alexander was in the kitchen when I walked out, already dressed, making coffee like this was routine. Like I belonged there. You're up early, I said. He glanced over his shoulder. You're still here. I leaned against the counter. Regretting it? He handed me a mug. No. Simple. Direct. Too easy. Careful, I said, taking a sip. You're starting to sound attached. That got a reaction. Not big, but I saw it. A slight pause. A shift in his expression. Then he looked at me again. And you're starting to sound like you want me to be. I scoffed, but it came out weaker than I wanted. You wish. Do I? I didn't answer. Because I didn't trust what I'd say. We kept seeing each other after that. But it wasn't the same. It couldn't be. The lines were blurred now, and no matter how much I tried to pretend otherwise, everything felt heavier. More intentional. He texted me during the day, not just at night anymore. Random things. Alexander, you'd hate this coffee. Or, Alexander, this guy at work reminds me of you. It's annoying. And somehow, that felt more intimate than anything else we'd done. Because it wasn't about convenience. It was about me. A few days later, I made the mistake of bringing him up to a friend. We were out, just grabbing drinks, nothing serious. But his name slipped out too easily. And then Alexander said, I stopped myself. Too late. My friend raised an eyebrow. Alexander? I shrugged, trying to play it off. Just a guy. Yeah? He said, unconvinced. Because the way you said that didn't sound like just a guy. I rolled my eyes. It's nothing. That's not what your face says. I took a sip of my drink, avoiding eye contact. There's no thing. I added. He hummed. And this no thing has a name, texts you during the day, and lives rent-free in your head? I shot him a look. You're dramatic. I'm observant. Great. Another one. You know this started as revenge, right? I said. He blinked. That makes it worse. How? Because you're still in it. That landed. I frowned. It's not like that. Then what's it like? I opened my mouth. And once again, nothing came out. That night, I didn't go to Alexander. Didn't text him. Didn't answer when he texted me. Alexander, you alive? Alexander, or did you finally come to your senses? I stared at the messages. Didn't reply. Because for the first time since this started, I actually tried to pull away. To create space. To prove, to myself more than anyone, that I still had control over this. It lasted exactly one day. The next evening, there was a knock on my door. I already knew who it was. I just stood there for a second before opening it. Alexander. Of course. Hands in his pockets, expression unreadable, but his eyes locked onto mine immediately. You're ignoring me now? He said. Busy. Right. He didn't believe that for a second. Something wrong? He asked. There it was. That tone. Not casual. Not distant. Concerned. And that was the problem. No, I said quickly. Nothing's wrong. Then why does it feel like you're trying to disappear? I hesitated. Just for a second. But he caught it. He always did. I'm not, I said. You are. I exhaled sharply. Why do you care? The question came out harsher than I meant. But I didn't take it back. I needed to hear his answer. And he didn't dodge it. Because it's you. Simple. Again. Too simple. My chest tightened in that familiar, frustrating way. You said you didn't do casual, I said, quieter now. I don't. Then what is this? He stepped closer. Not enough to touch, but enough that I felt it. Not casual. That answer should have scared me. And it did. Just not enough to make me walk away. Pierce, he said softer now. If you want out, just say it. I looked at him. Really looked at him. And realized something I hadn't let myself admit yet. I didn't want out. That was the problem. I don't, I said. Barely above a whisper. But he heard it. Of course he did. And the way his expression shifted after that. Not relief. Not victory. Something deeper. Like this actually meant something to him. That should have been my breaking point. The moment I finally understood how far this had gone. But instead, I stepped closer. And let it happen. Again. At some point, it stopped feeling temporary. Not all at once. Not in some dramatic, obvious way. Just slowly. Like something shifting under the surface until you look up one day and realize you're not where you thought you were anymore. It was a random Tuesday when it hit me. Nothing special about it. I had a long day at work, my phone died halfway through, and by the time I got home, all I wanted was to crash and not talk to anyone. So I didn't. I showered, threw on a t-shirt, and collapsed onto my bed without even checking my messages. And for a while, it worked. Silence. Quiet. Exactly what I needed. Until it wasn't. Because after maybe 20 minutes, I caught myself reaching for my phone. Dead. Of course. I stared at the ceiling for a second, then sat up, grabbing the charger. The moment it turned back on, the screen lit up with notifications. Most of them didn't matter. But one name stood out. Alexander. 3 messages. I opened them. Alexander, you disappeared again. Alexander, starting to think you do that on purpose. Then, Alexander, you okay? That last one. That's the one that got me. Because it wasn't annoyed. It wasn't sarcastic. It was just genuine. And something about that made my chest feel tight in a way I didn't like. Or maybe did. I didn't overthink it. Didn't give myself time to. I just grabbed my keys. I didn't text him back. Didn't call. I just showed up. Again. And honestly, that was becoming a pattern. He opened the door like he knew it was me. No surprise. No questions. Just that same look, focused, steady, like I was exactly who he expected to see. You do this a lot, he said. What? Show up instead of answering. I shrugged, stepping inside. You complaining? He closed the door behind me. Not really. Of course not. I didn't even make it 2 steps before I said it. I think I'm screwing this up. The words came out before I could filter them. Before I could turn them into something lighter, something easier. Alexander didn't react right away. Just watched me. Waiting. For someone who started this as a game, he said slowly. You sound pretty serious right now. I am. That surprised both of us. Because I didn't hesitate. Didn't try to take it back. I meant it. And that was new. He stepped closer, not invading my space, but not keeping distance either. Okay, he said. Then explain. I ran a hand through my hair, exhaling. I don't know what this is anymore. You've said that before? Yeah, but before I didn't care. That landed. I saw it in the way his expression shifted slightly. Now? He asked. I looked at him. Held it for a second. Now I do. Silence. Not awkward. Not tense. Just real. And heavy. Because once you say something like that, you can't take it back. Alexander nodded slowly, like he was processing it. Good. I blinked. Good? Yeah. That's your response? He huffed out a quiet laugh, shaking his head. No, that's not my whole response. Then what is? He stepped closer. This time, there was no space left between us. You think you're screwing this up, he said. I think you're finally being honest about it. That doesn't make it better. It kind of does. I frowned. How? Because now we're not pretending. That word again. Pretending. And yeah, he wasn't wrong. We hadn't been for a while. I just hadn't said it out loud. You're not exactly neutral in this either, I pointed out. I never said I was. You said you knew what this was. I said I knew what you said it was. Right. Then why'd you go along with it? I asked. Even now, I still needed to understand that. Why me? Why this? He didn't look away. Didn't hesitate. Because I liked you from the start. That caught me off guard. Again. You didn't even know me. I knew enough. I let out a breath, shaking my head slightly. You keep saying that. Because it's true. There was no ego in it. No arrogance. Just certainty. And for some reason, that made it harder to argue with. So what now? I asked. Finally. The question we'd been avoiding this whole time. He studied me for a second. Long enough that I felt it. That depends. On what? On whether you're still trying to get revenge. I froze. Because that was the part one hadn't said out loud in a while. The part that felt distant now. Like something I used to care about. I'm not, I admitted. And yeah, that was the truth. Not even complicated. Just true. Alexander nodded once. Like that confirmed something for him. Then he reached out, slow, deliberate, and rested his hand lightly against my side. Not pulling me in. Not pushing anything. Just there. Grounding. Then we stop pretending this is anything but what it actually is. And what's that? I asked quietly. His eyes didn't leave mine. You tell me. And for once, I didn't have a sarcastic answer. Didn't have a deflection ready. Just one thing sitting there, obvious and unavoidable. I think. I started then stopped. Because saying it felt like crossing another line. One I couldn't uncross. But he didn't rush me. Didn't interrupt. Just waited. Like he already knew where this was going. And maybe he did. I think I fell for you, I said finally. There it was. Out. Real. And way too late to take back. For a second, either of us moved. Then Alexander exhaled, like he'd been holding that in longer than I realized. Yeah, he said quietly. Yeah? Yeah. That's it? I asked. A small, disbelieving laugh slipping out. You're just okay with that? He looked at me like I'd missed something obvious. I'd been waiting for you to catch up. And somehow, that hit even harder than everything else. Because suddenly it all made sense. The way he paid attention. The way he didn't treat this like a game. The way he never really acted like it was temporary. He wasn't catching up to me. I was catching up to him. And the worst part? I didn't even regret it. Not anymore. Not even a little. Everything should have felt easier after that. That's what I expected, at least. You say it out loud, you admit what's been building this whole time, and suddenly things make sense. Things settle. Except, they didn't. Because now it was real. And real meant there was actually something to lose. The shift was subtle at first. Nothing between us changed in an obvious way. We still saw each other, still talked the same, still fell into that easy rhythm we built without even noticing. But underneath it? There was weight now. Every look lasted a second longer. Every silence meant something. Every small thing mattered more than it used to. And that should have been a good thing. So why did it make me feel like I was waiting for it to fall apart? It hit me a few days later. I was at Alexander's place again, no surprise there, and we were just existing in the same space. He was working on something on his laptop. I was stretched out on the couch, half scrolling through my phone, half watching him. It was quiet. Comfortable. Dangerously comfortable. You're staring, he said without looking up. I'm not. Yeah, you are. I smirked slightly. You're full of yourself. He hummed. Or I just know you. That again. He always said things like that so casually. Like it wasn't a big deal. Like knowing me wasn't something. I looked away first. What? He asked after a second. Nothing. Pierce. There was that tone. The one that meant he wasn't going to let it go. I sighed, sitting up slightly. It's just weird. That got his attention. He closed his laptop, setting it aside before looking at me fully. Weird how? I hesitated. Because I knew how this was going to sound. Everything's good, I said. He raised an eyebrow. That's the problem? Yes. You're going to have to explain that. I let out a breath, running a hand through my hair. It's too easy, I admitted. This. His expression didn't change, but I could tell he was listening closely. And that bothers you? It should bother you too. Why? Because things like this don't just work, I said. Not like this. And how exactly is this working? I gestured vaguely between us. No drama. No complications. No mess. He leaned back slightly, studying me. And you think that's a bad thing? I think it's not realistic. That was the truth. Because nothing in my life had ever been this steady. Not without something going wrong eventually. Alexander was quiet for a second. Or maybe, he said slowly, you're just waiting for it to go wrong. That hit hard. Because yeah, I was. I've seen how this goes, I said. Have you? Yes. With me? I didn't answer right away. Because no. Not with him. But that didn't stop the feeling. It doesn't matter, I said. It always ends the same. That's a pretty big assumption. It's experience. He nodded slightly, like he understood. But he didn't agree. I could tell. Okay, he said. Then let me ask you something. I looked at him. When has anything you felt with me been the same as what you've experienced before? I opened my mouth. And stopped. Because it hadn't. Not even close. This wasn't like my ex. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't confusing. It wasn't one-sided. It wasn't something I had to question every 5 seconds. It was just there. Consistent. Real. And that scared me more than anything else. I don't know, I admitted quietly. That's honest, he said. Yeah. Silence settled between us again. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was steady. Grounded. You're allowed to not screw this up, you know, he added after a moment. I let out a small, humorless laugh. Feels unlikely. Feels new, he corrected. I glanced at him. That doesn't make it easier. No, he agreed. It doesn't. But it might make it worth it. That stuck with me. Long after I left that night. Long after I was back in my own place, lying in my own bed, staring at the ceiling like I had been weeks ago. Except this time, everything was different. Because I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. I wasn't thinking about my ex. I wasn't even thinking about whether this was a mistake. I was thinking about him. About us. And about the fact that for the first time in a long time, I actually wanted something to last. That realization should have felt good. Instead, it made everything feel more fragile. Because wanting something like that meant I could lose it. The next morning, I woke up to a text. Alexander, come over tonight. Simple. No pressure. No expectations. Just there. And for a second, I stared at it. Not because I didn't want to go. But because I did. Too easily. Too naturally. So I typed back. Pierce, only if you admit you miss me. His reply came almost instantly. Alexander, I'm not that nice. I smiled. Then, Alexander, but yeah? I do. And just like that. I knew. I was already all in. Whether I liked it or not. I wish I could say I handled it well after that. That once I realized I was all in, I just leaned into it. Let things happen the way they were supposed to. But that's not really how I work. Because the second something starts to matter too much, I start looking for the cracks. It wasn't anything Alexander did. That's the frustrating part. If he'd pulled away, gotten distant, given me any reason to doubt this, it would have been easier to justify what happened next. But he didn't. If anything, he was more consistent than ever. And somehow, that made it worse. It started with something small. We were out together, not a date, not officially, but it might as well have been. Just grabbing drinks, sitting a little too close, talking like there wasn't anyone else in the room. Normal. Easy. Until someone recognized him. Alexander? I saw it in the way his posture shifted slightly before he even turned. Subtle. But there. He looked over his shoulder, and his expression changed, just a fraction. Oh, he said. Hey. The guy who walked up to us looked familiar. Not in a way I could place immediately, but enough to make something in my chest tighten. They exchanged a look. Not awkward. Not distant. Just knowing. And suddenly, I didn't feel as comfortable as I had 5 seconds ago. This is Pierce, Alexander said, gesturing toward me. The guy smiled. Nice to meet you. Yeah, I replied, polite but already pulling back internally. You too. There was a pause. Then the guy looked back at Alexander. Didn't expect to see you here? Yeah, Alexander said casually. Just out. Another look passed between them. Quick. But I caught it. And just like that. The cracks I'd been waiting for? I started imagining them everywhere. The conversation didn't last long. A few more words, a quick goodbye, and the guy walked off. But the feeling didn't leave with him. I leaned back slightly, crossing my arms. Friend of yours? Alexander didn't answer immediately. Something like that. Something like that? I frowned. What does that mean? He glanced at me. Just someone I used to know. There it was. Vague. Too vague. And my brain immediately filled in the blanks. Used to know how? I pressed. He sighed quietly, not annoyed, just careful. Pierce. No, it's fine. I cut in quickly. I'm just asking. You're not just asking. He wasn't wrong. But I didn't like being called out on it. Why does it matter? I said. You tell me. I looked away. Because I didn't want to say it out loud. Didn't want to admit how fast my mind had gone there. How easily doubt had slipped in. I just don't like not knowing where I stand, I said finally. That was honest. Even if it wasn't the full truth. Alexander leaned back slightly, watching me. You know where you stand. Do I? Yes. How? I asked. Because it felt like I just got dropped into the middle of something I know nothing about. That's not what happened. It kind of is. There was a beat of silence. You're overthinking this. And just like that. I felt it. That shift. The one I'd been waiting for. Right. I said, a little sharper now. Of course I am. Pierce. No, it's fine. I repeated. I get it. What do you get? That this isn't as simple as I thought. His expression changed slightly. Not defensive. Not guilty. Just serious. It's not complicated either. That's easy for you to say. Why? Because you're not the one trying to figure out if you're the only one in this. The words slipped out before I could stop them. And the second they did, I knew. I'd crossed a line. Alexander went still. Not angry. Not even surprised. Just still. Is that what you think? He asked quietly. I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. Not really. But the fact that I could think it? That was enough. He nodded slowly. Okay. That was it. No argument. No reassurance. Just, okay. And somehow, that felt worse than if he'd gotten upset. What does that mean? I asked. It means, he said, standing up. If that's where your head's at, then we're not having the same conversation anymore. I frowned, standing up too. What is that supposed to mean? It means you're questioning something I haven't given you a reason to question. That's not fair. It's not supposed to be fair. He cut in. It's supposed to be real. Silence. Thick. Immediate. Because he wasn't raising his voice. Wasn't making a scene. He was just done engaging in whatever this was turning into. You don't trust me, he said. Not accusing. Just stating it. That hit harder than anything else. Because I didn't have a clean answer. Not one that made me look good. I'm trying to, I said. And yeah. That sounded weak. Even to me. Alexander nodded again. Then do it. Simple. Frustratingly simple. Because I'm not going to convince you of something I've already been showing you. And that was it. No dramatic exit. No big fight. Just distance. I stood there for a second after he walked away. Heart pounding, thoughts all over the place. Because this wasn't what I expected. I thought if something went wrong, it would be obvious. Clear. Something I could point to and say that's the problem. But this was on me. And I knew it. I left not long after that. No goodbye. No resolution. Just silence. And for the first time since this started, I wasn't sure if I'd just ruined the one thing I actually didn't want to lose. I didn't text him that night. Or the next morning. Or even the day after that. Not because I didn't want to. But because I didn't know what to say that wouldn't make it worse. And that was new for me. Usually, I either avoided things completely or pushed until I got a reaction. But this felt different. Because I knew this wasn't about winning an argument. It was about whether I'd just broken something that actually mattered. By the third day, the silence felt louder than anything else. His name wasn't lighting up my phone. No random messages. No casual check-ins. Nothing. And I hated how much I noticed. I tried to distract myself. Work. Friends. Anything. But it didn't stick. Because everything kept circling back to the same thing. That moment. The way he looked at me. Not angry. Not hurt, exactly. Just disappointed. And somehow, that was worse. On the fourth day, I gave up. Not in a dramatic way. Just quietly. I grabbed my keys, got in my car, and drove over without thinking too hard about it. Because if I kept waiting for the perfect thing to say, I'd lose my chance to say anything at all. I stood outside his door for a full minute before knocking. Long enough to consider leaving. Long enough to almost convince myself that maybe space was better. But I knocked anyway. Once. Then waited. When he opened the door, it felt like everything slowed down for a second. Alexander looked exactly the same. Same calm expression. Same steady presence. But there was distance now. Subtle. But there. You took your time, he said. No anger. No warmth either. Just neutral. I know, I replied. We stood there for a second. Neither of us moving. Then he stepped aside. Come in. The silence inside felt heavier than the one outside. I didn't sit. Didn't pretend this was casual. I messed up, I said. Straight to it. No deflection this time. No sarcasm. Just the truth. Alexander leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching me. You did. No hesitation. No softening. And weirdly, I appreciated that. I know you didn't give me a reason to doubt you, I continued. He didn't interrupt. Didn't help. Just let me say it. I think I just panicked. That sounded pathetic out loud. But it was real. I'm not used to something actually being steady, I added. And I screwed it up before I could let myself trust it. That's not really about me, he said. No, I admitted. It's not. Then I forced myself to say the part that actually mattered. But I still made it your problem. He exhaled slowly, looking down for a second before meeting my eyes again. That's the part that bothered me. I know. You didn't just question the situation, he said. You questioned me. I know. And that's not the same thing. I know. Each time I said it, it felt heavier. Because I wasn't arguing. Wasn't defending myself. I was just owning it. So what now? He asked. Same question as before. But this time, it felt different. More serious. More final. I stepped closer. Not all the way. Just enough. Now I stop pretending I don't care, I said. His expression didn't change. So I kept going. And I stopped looking for reasons to mess this up before it even has a chance. Still nothing. No reaction. No reassurance. So I took a breath and said the only thing left. I trust you. The words felt heavier than anything else I'd said so far. Because they weren't easy. They weren't automatic. They were a choice. Alexander studied me for a long second. Like he was deciding whether he believed me. Or maybe whether it was enough. You can't say that just because things got uncomfortable, he said finally. I'm not. You said it because you're afraid of losing this. Yeah, I admitted. At least I wasn't pretending anymore. Then he pushed himself off the counter, stepping closer. This time, he didn't stop halfway. Say it again, he said. I frowned slightly. What? That you trust me. I held his gaze. Didn't hesitate this time. I trust you. Something shifted. Not dramatically. Not like everything snapped back into place. But enough. Enough that I saw it in his expression. That slight softening. That return of something that had been missing the past few days. Okay, he said quietly. Just that. But this time, it was different. This time, it felt like something being rebuilt. I'm not perfect at this, I added. You already know that. Yeah, he said. I do. But I don't want to lose this. His eyes stayed on mine. Then don't. Simple. Again. But now. It didn't feel frustrating. It felt grounding. He reached for me then. Not rushed. Not hesitant. Just natural. Like we'd both been standing there waiting for it. And when his hand settled against my side again. That same place as before. It didn't feel uncertain anymore. I didn't start this for the right reasons, I said quietly. I know. But I stayed for the right ones. That got a reaction. A real one. Subtle, but there. Yeah, he said. And this time. There was something in his voice I hadn't heard before. Something softer. Something real. Looking back now, I still think it's kind of insane that I started all of this out of spite. Out of something petty and impulsive. And somehow ended up here. Not perfect. Not effortless. But real. And honestly, that's better. Because I didn't get revenge. Not really. What I got instead was something I didn't even know I was looking for.